The sun bleeds out over the Rif Mountains, painting the jagged peaks in orange and purple. Down in the valleys of northern Algeria, shadows stretch and a biting chill settles in. A wind stirs, snaking through goat tracks and whistling past shuttered farmhouses. It carries a whisper, a story passed from one hushed voice to another. Something stalks these lonely roads after dusk, turning the familiar into a place of dread. For the people here, the night has always held dangers, but this is a new kind of fear. They call him the Rif Killer, a phantom, a ghost story, but the stories are growing. The fear is no longer just fireside talk, it is seeped into the soil. Every gust of wind feels like a warning, every rustle a footstep. The Rif, with its labyrinthine paths and hidden caves, has always been a place of secrets. Now, its isolation is a curse. Dusty roads connecting villages have become arteries of fear. Travelers hurry, eyes darting to the hills. The silence is heavy with menace. This was Algeria in the 1990s. A nation in turmoil, but here a more primal terror took root. The Rif Killer's story was just beginning, fed by disappearances and chilling silence. The legend grew with each passing day. The whisper on the wind was becoming a roar. In these mountains, fear had a name, and soon the world would know it too. The hunt for the Rif Killer was about to begin. It started subtly. A shepherd missing at sundown, a young woman vanishing on her way to visit family, a merchant's cart abandoned on a lonely road. At first, these were seen as isolated tragedies. People got lost, accidents happened, but soon the pattern was impossible to ignore. Disappearances grew more frequent, more audacious. People vanished from their own homes, a farmer checking livestock, a child from their bed. The victims were varied, men, women, young, old, no logic, no target. The randomness was terrifying, anyone could be next. The killer's methods were brutal and efficient, rarely signs of struggle, as if victims were plucked away by a shadow. Whispers spread of a man who moved like a ghost, striking with shocking violence and vanishing without a trace. He became a jinn in local legend, a malevolent spirit. Fear changed daily life. Doors bolted, gatherings dwindled, trust eroded. Every stranger was suspicious, every sound a threat. The Rif Killer wasn't just taking lives, he was stealing the region's peace. The community's fabric began to unravel. Paranoia replaced trust. The legend grew, and so did the terror. The Rif was no longer just a place of danger. It was a place haunted by a living nightmare. The vanishing had become an epidemic. As the body count rose, so did the legend of the Rif Killer. He became a mythical figure. Some said a mad soldier, others a creature born of the mountains. These stories tried to explain the incomprehensible terror gripping their lives. The brutality of his crimes was extreme. Victims found in remote caves, violence far beyond necessity. He was called the Shadow, the Mountain Ghost. But his anonymity was his power. He could be anyone, anywhere. A faceless terror eroding trust. The killer's uncanny ability to evade capture only deepened his myth. Search parties found nothing but silence. He was a phantom, a master of the land, always one step ahead. For the people of the Rif, it felt like a nightmare with no end. The legend was written in blood. Fear spread from isolated hamlets to the entire region. Stories of the Rif Killer traveled faster than official news, growing more gruesome with each retelling. Panic became contagious, infecting every community. Authorities seemed slow and distant, leaving a vacuum filled by rumor and paranoia. Markets closed early, farmers carried rifles, children stayed indoors. The rhythm of life was now dictated by fear. Roads emptied, trade slowed, villages became isolated islands. The region felt under siege, not by an army, but by a single invisible predator. The panic was about more than violence, it was about the collapse of their way of life. Police were outmatched, villagers powerless. As months passed and bodies mounted, terror became a fact of life. The Rif Killer was no longer just a threat, he was a shadow over their world. The panic had become their new reality. The scale of the disappearances forced national authorities to act. A special task force was assembled, detectives, trackers, forensic experts. Their mission, hunt down the phantom terrorizing the north. The challenges were immense. Outsiders in a suspicious, traumatized community. Detectives had to win trust, separate fact from folklore, and find real clues. The terrain was the killer's ally. Sprawling wilderness, hidden valleys, endless caves. Search teams combed the hills, but the killer always seemed one step ahead. The breakthrough came from mapping disappearances. A pattern emerged, pointing to a remote area. The killer was a man, not a myth, and a man could be caught. With a target area identified, the task force tightened its grip. Checkpoints monitored roads, undercover officers gathered intelligence, and the killer's patterns were disrupted. Old case files revealed a name: Mohammed Bijoui, a solitary local with a history of petty crime. His home sat at the center of the crime cluster. Surveillance began. Bijoui's routine was mundane, but his knowledge of the land was unmatched. He disappeared into the wilderness for days at a time. Suspicion became certainty. They were watching their man. When a young boy went missing, the task force moved in. Pre-dawn, a tactical team stormed Bijoui's farmhouse. He was found asleep, offering no resistance, calm, almost resigned. The hunt was over, but as dawn broke, the true scale of horror was about to be revealed. The legend had a face, and the nightmare was real. The arrest of Mohammed Bijoui shocked the Rif. This quiet, unassuming man was the monster of their nightmares. He looked ordinary, a familiar face dismissed as eccentric. The evil was not supernatural, it was human, and it had lived among them. Investigators searched his property and uncovered a den of horrors. Personal belongings of dozens of victims, shallow graves, and hidden remains. Bijoui confessed with chilling detachment, describing murders stretching back over a decade. The official count would exceed 400 victims. The nation reeled. Bijoui was one of the most prolific killers in modern history. In interrogation, he revealed a portrait of alienation and rage. Killing gave him power. His victims were chosen at random. There was no grand motive, just cold, predatory nihilism. The face of the monster was human, and the reasons were terrifyingly mundane. The legend was dead, replaced by a far more disturbing reality. The true horror was now known. Why did it take so long? The answer lay in geography, politics, and the social fabric of the time. The Rif's isolation, scattered communities, and harsh terrain gave Bijoui cover for years. Algeria's 1990s civil conflict stretched security forces thin. Rural disappearances were a low priority. The state looked elsewhere, allowing Bijoui to operate in the nation's blind spot. Proud, self-reliant villagers handled early disappearances internally, delaying recognition of the pattern. Bijoui was meticulous, targeting isolated victims and hiding bodies in the wilderness. He was a ghost in the system, invisible until it was too late. The reckoning was delayed by a perfect storm of circumstances. The trial and execution of Mohammed Bijoui ended his reign, but the scars remain. Relief was mixed with trauma. The evil had a name and a face, and it was one of their own. The mountains, once symbols of strength, were now tainted by horror. For survivors, the pain is constant. Hundreds of empty chairs, stories cut short. The truth brought no closure, only new agony and a sense of betrayal by both Bijoui and the system. The legend is gone, replaced by chilling history, a cautionary tale for generations. The fear has changed. It's no longer of the unknown, but of the known. Monsters are real, and they do not always look like monsters. The community's innocence is lost. Suspicion lingers in every valley. Life continues, but something is irrevocably changed. Doors are bolted, strangers watched, silence less peaceful. The ghost of Bijoui still haunts the Rif, in memory, in story, in the scars left behind. The land will never forget.